can you hear me? Good evening. Before I call our meeting to order tonight, I would like to take a brief moment of silence to honor and remember our friend Steve Benko. Steve was a longtime friend to the New Canaan Public Schools and always willing to help and support our schools in every way. And I personally and many others in our schools worked with Steve for many years, and we will all miss him very much. Thank you. In addition, I'd also like to take a moment to just acknowledge the situation in Ukraine and to offer our heartfelt thoughts and support for all of those in our community with family and friends in Ukraine. And just know that we're here to support you and we'll be thinking of you. Thank you. At this time, I'll call our meeting to order, the March 7th meeting of the New Canaan Board of Education. First, we'll review and approve the agenda. Is there a motion? Erica, second. Dan, all in favor? Okay, thank you.
Can I just mention the typo?
Yeah. Oh, just, yeah, there is a typo under action items. The first one, adjustment, it should say adjustment to the 21-22 school district calendar. So we'll note that when we get to the motion as well.
Yeah, got ahead of myself a little there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Next is the approval of minutes. First is the February 4th special meeting. Can I have a motion? Brendan, second. Bob, all in favor? Thank you. And then our February 7th meeting. Motion to approve. Phil, second. Dan, all in favor? Great, thank you. Comments from the public. To ensure the public's right to be heard, the board has set aside time during the meeting for public comments. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker and a maximum of 15 minutes to each subject. Is there anyone who would like to address the board? Just please state your name. Thank you.
Paul Girach. So, good evening, everyone. It's nice to see faces. And I just wanted to say, Dr. Lutzy, I know I sent you a recent email, and it was just in regard to things that, certainly have come to my mind with what's happening here. I'm sure we all have thoughts, but I think of historical figures in times like this, being a historian. And the person who comes to mind is Otto von Bismarck. And I think about his accomplishments, one of the greatest statesmen in European history, architect of the unification of Germany mid-late 19th century, as well as just being a fantastic statesman and of course, the former Prime Minister of Prussia. And he unified people. He did it in a way that was perhaps never seen in European history, maybe going back to antiquity with Alexander the Great. But what Otto von Bismarck did was he severed entanglements, and he did it by severing, in his context, historical, it was foreign entanglements. So in that historical context, it pertains to foreign policy. As it pertains to here in New Canaan, it's about bureaucratic entanglements. And I think once the children are placed first and we see the will of the people will always prevail, and that's what we need to happen. And I think, for example, the letter that was written and endorsed by yourself as well as all the Board of Ed members, I think it's one of the most significant letters ever written in the history of this town. I really do. And I think that's something that everyone should be certainly proud of, although we certainly have an ideologically diverse group of Board of Ed members, which I think is fine. Everyone eventually came on board, and I think that's what's important. And just as it pertains to where we are now, I think morale is very high. I think I had an excellent email exchange with one of my kids' teachers who said she's just so happy to see their faces. The daughter came home from school and said, "Oh, wow, my teacher said I have a beautiful face." It's good that we're there now. I think it's very telling where we've been the last 2 years. But I think this is the right path forward. I think the ship is being steered in the right direction. I think, again, the will of the people is just something that won't be denied, and it will never be denied going forward. I think you have people spoke, as you said in your email as well. It was a concerted effort. It was a community effort, which I think is a great thing. And I just think, thank you very much. And I just think we need to go there. And thank you to the board, and especially the 4 new outstanding Board of Ed members to whom I don't believe this would be possible. But thank you to everyone, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any others? Okay, moving on. We have a full agenda of reports and recognition, but tonight we lead with an update on our Visual and Performing Arts program with Mr. Alan Sneath.
So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Alan Sneath to the board. Alan is our K through 12 Director of Visual and Performing Arts. And this evening, Alan will be giving us an update on goal number 1, objective number 8, which is addressing our VPA curriculum and the updates that is necessary. So take it away, Alan.
All right, thank you, Dr. Corenti. Good evening, everyone. I'm here tonight, as you're aware, to provide an update on the Board of Education goal that the visual performing arts teachers have been working with over the past 3 years. When you're looking at the goal, there are 3 different pieces that we looked at. We looked at looking at the old Common Core standards, the new standards, and then also writing UBD units of study for our K-12 programs. The second piece includes taking a close look at the classroom instruction and identifying best practices that are happening in our classrooms and articulating those and sharing those across the board. And then the third piece addresses keeping our students safe during the pandemic. So the good news is we're kind of finished with the third objective, so we're really moving forward and looking at the first 2 pieces of the goal. I wanted to share with you the VPA mission statement that we created. The board goal was established, I believe, in the summer 2018. In the fall, when our teachers came back, we met together and we created a common vision and mission that we wanted our students to basically be able to function in the 21st century, and we wanted them to think, feel, question, communicate, and persevere as lifelong learners. The most important piece to me of this mission statement is that we really want to provide experiences and connections that inspire expression of personal voice through the creative process. So with this as our foundation, we kind of use that as our focus as we were working on the Board of Education goal. I would be remiss if I did not share with you the names of all the teachers that we work with in the Visual and Performing Arts Department. There's quite a few moving pieces. In fact, there are 28 teachers that work in the district in our 5 schools. These teachers are resilient. Over the last 2.5 years, they've been working with me and each other and really looking at all the different, the new Common Core art standards, as well as doing a crosswork with the old art and music national standards. You know, it's a given that our art and music teachers have degrees in art and music education. What makes us unique here in New Canaan is almost every one of our art teachers exhibits work at a regional and national level. They serve as consultants. For instance, we have one of our art teachers that helped with the Wilton Library when they put up a mural. Coincidentally, or also, our music teachers also are professional musicians. It's not uncommon to see some of them performing with the Bridgeport Symphony, New Haven Symphony. We have teachers that play in some of the Pitts or Broadway musicals. We also have a couple of our teachers that have done TV treatments and that have created videos for the Beardsley Zoo in Bridgeport. So what makes us unique here in New Canaan is our teachers teach and they can do. And I have to tell you, if you don't know them, they are a phenomenal group of people. And it's just been really great to see how they've risen to the occasion over the last 2 years and really gave our students experiences where they could really thrive in the arts, no matter what was going on in the rest of the world. So the timeline. As I mentioned before, in 2018, we started this board goal. We spent the first part of 2018 and 19 looking at the old art standards, doing a crosswork with the new Common Core standards. We had professional learning where we talked about what we wanted to do with the new 4 artistic processes that are part of the Common Core standards. We aligned grade level expectations with the standards. And then I was here with the board in August 8th, 2019, and just presented a really, really short update on the work that was completed up to that point. 2019 through 21, we brought in Dee Hansen from Hart School of Music at the University of Connecticut to provide training for our staff. We met in the Sax VPA lab, and she spent the day looking at some of the work that was done, and then also just looking at some of the work that needed to be done. She edited some of the documents, and then by the end of the day, we had really a great wealth of knowledge how to move forward without needing her assistance as we moved forward with the writing. The staff really, after she left, we really started writing the UBD units of study, and then March the 9th hit us. If you think about it, 2 years from, today's the 7th, so 2 years from the 9th. So basically everything stopped because we really had to adapt and think differently about everything that we did in the classroom. You know, the art teachers were no longer in the classrooms, they were in the regular core classrooms. Our music teachers were not singing, they were not playing the recorder. So March the 9th, we stopped, and then we regrouped, we created really great experiences for our students, and then at the start of the school year, as things were getting back to normal, we started writing the UBD units again. So it was hard, it was challenging, but we have the best staff. I would put them up against anybody to get us through that process. And I hope that if you have children at home, when they came home from this, from the end of the day, you said, "What did you do?" And they said they had fun learning about art and music. Excuse me, I should have got some water. Thank you. So just as a refresher, the National Standards for Music and Art Education were created in 1994. These standards are basically skills-based. They provided a knowledge of what good education, good arts education meant in our classrooms. The music standards, singing, performing, improvising, creating, and also cultural connections are included. And then in the visual art standards, it's almost the same thing. They're skills-based. Students apply media, technique, and process. Students are evaluated. They evaluate subject matter. They connect to history and culture. And then they reflect upon their own work as well as the work of others. These standards are also embedded in the National Core Art Standards. I'm going to take a really quick breath and slow down and take a sip of water. So I mentioned that the former standards were skills-based. The new standards are concepts-based. We no longer talk about standards as a list of things that children should be doing. Rather, we talk about standards as measurable and attainable learning events based upon artistic goals. The core standards that we've been working with over the past 2 years, general music is through K through 8. Composition and theory is at the high school. Music technology is grades 5 through 8. Ensemble is grades 5 through 8. Visual arts is K through 12. And the media arts is 7 through 12. 7 through 12, some of the students are learning graphic design, and they're doing stop animation, and they're also doing, they design posters in the 7th and 8th grade. There are also core standards in dance and theater, but unfortunately right now we don't have we don't have dance and music in our course of studies. Sorry. So the National Core Art Standards have 4 artistic processes: creating, presenting, performing, and producing, responding, and connecting. These processes represent everything that happens in our arts classrooms. Students create original work in their art and music classrooms. They perform in our music classrooms. they present in our art classrooms, and they produce in the tech labs. Each process has 2 to 3 anchor standards, which are foundation pillars of our work with our students. In addition, there are anchor standards that are aligned with each one of these different artistic processes. So basically what we did is we took the old standards, we figured out how they align with the artistic processes, and then did kind of a parallel grouping with the new anchor standards to write UBD units. Part of the process, when we first met last year, or the year before, sorry, each teacher started working on graphic organizers. They wanted to have some way of capturing all the information that they needed to put into the UBD unit. This represents a 4th grade drawing unit. Typically when I present, I would go from the 30,000 or the 3,000 point perspective. What I want to do now is I call it the balcony or the mezzanine. We're going to go a little bit closer. And I want to focus just on the drawing strand, K through 12. If I was going to talk about ceramics or painting or choir or band or orchestra, I would be here for 3 days. So I wanted just to focus in on the drawing aspect. If you're looking at this chart, you can see the 4 artistic processes going down the left-hand side. Creating, presenting, we're presenting because it's art. It would be performing if it was choir. Responding and connecting. Also, when you're looking at this, you can see the skill objectives, materials, vocabulary, enduring understandings, essential questions, historical and cultural connections. We usually have an art icon. Keith Herring is particular to this particular 4th grade unit. And then also we have sample performance assessments. This one here is self-portrait, figure drawing, and portraits. And I wanted to explain how this works as far as my position as a supervisor. Every year at the start of the year, I have TEPL meetings, teacher evaluation, personal learning meetings with the staff, and we talk about what are their goals for the year. So we talk, what do you want to learn, what do you want to do, and then, thank you. And then we have a mid-year conference between December and the end of February. And at that point, they bring in their benchmark assessments. This one here is a self-portrait. So the teachers come in, they show their student work, and then we talk about, well, where are the students? How do you differentiate to bring all the students up to where they should be? What are some of the strategies you do for the students that are at the top? And how do you keep everything moving? So that's just drawing. We also do that with painting, ceramics, and 3D. At the end of the year, and that's just art, right? At the end of the year, the teachers come in again, and we look at the overall growth. Where do the students go? How did they get there? What did you do? What are your goals for the next year? So by the end of the year, I have a really good idea of what our students are doing in the classroom, and then we take each piece of art and we create anchor sets. So when we meet the next year, we can see where grade level expectations are for drawing. Here's below standard, here's above standard, and here's excellent. And then what we do is we create scenarios and ways for the teachers to differentiate to make sure all the students show progress. So the importance of having the sample performance assessments in this particular document is really important because it really shares evidence of what the students are doing. So this is just one graphic organizer that the teachers have created. Here's another graphic drawing organizer. Right. And as you look at this, I want you to think about what it's like when you're you're a parent of an elementary student, and your child comes home and your child has his or her self-portrait. And you're thinking, oh, that's really a nice portrait. I love how you drew your face. Well, you know what? They're not just drawing a face. The students are learning about facial features, and they're learning how to put those facial features within the spatial part of the page. They're learning about shapes. They're learning about perspective. They're learning about composition. The students are learning about texture. How do you add texture for your hair? How do you create eyebrows and eyelashes? You create texture. The students are learning about how to express who they are visually. They're also learning how to present work in a finished format and how to look critically at their work as well as the process that got them there. The same is true with music class. Your child comes home, what did you do today? Well, I marched to the steady beat. Oh, that sounds so nice. Well, you know what? They were marching to the steady beat, but also they were learning about how to keep a steady beat, so when they perform later, they can stay in rhythm with everybody else. They're learning steady beat. They're learning rhythm. Then the next concept they learn, pitch, high, low. If you think about it, children's first songs usually like rain, rain, go away. So and me. So and me developmentally are some of the first sounds that the students can perceive and they can replicate. The next thing that we add, if you think about it, are loud and soft. So we have slow, fast, high, low, loud, soft. Those are the three basic foundation pieces of music. So when your students come home and they said they skip to the beat, well, they skip to the beat because they're learning how to keep a steady rhythm, so then they can learn how to sing their songs, they can match pitch, and then they can perform and produce it. So everything that we do in our classrooms is really well thought out. So the purpose of all the different things I've been sharing with you is when we create our programs and our documents, it's been planned. All of our teachers have sat, they meet, our elementary teachers meet frequently, our sax art teachers meet every C day, the music teachers meet every F day, the high school art teachers meet every Friday, and the music teachers meet every G day. We meet frequently, we really set our goals. So the next page, sorry, I'm like on a roll here. The next page is just basically a page with essential drawing skills for our elementary teachers. The reason why we did this is we found that there wasn't one document that had all the different techniques and concepts in it. So by having this, a teacher can kind of look as they're going throughout the school year, making sure that they addressed every single thing for drawing, as well as having the materials and supplies that they need in place so the students can do their work. This is just one document. Think about painting, painting, ceramics, and 3D as well. This page here is just first page of the elementary art scope and sequence. Because our teachers teach across 3 different schools, it's really important to keep them all on the same page. So what we did is we created a scope and sequence so the students are aligned from school to school, from fall, winter, spring, and summer. Well, not summer, obviously. But it's important to point out that sometimes your students might not look like they're aligned because a teacher might try a new lesson, they might try some new media, but regardless, they are really focusing on the scope and sequence to make sure that students are aligned across the table so when they get to the middle school, they'll all have the same experiences in art and in music. So I'm not going to show you a lot of a UBD unit because we have quite a few that we've created, but this is just an example of a 4th grade drawing unit. Before I talked about the anchor standards, as you're looking over to the left column where it says standards, you see VA, CR, that means create, and then we have VAPR, which is present. It's present because it's an art class. It would be perform if it was a music class. We have VE, which is respond, and C and connect. Then you have the enduring understandings on the left-hand side, the essential questions on the right-hand side, and the transfer goal. Basically, the transfer goal is what should the students be able to do in the next class or in the future time doing something unique that's not the same thing. How do you apply it in a new, unique situation? One point I wanted to make that our elementary art students meet once a cycle. So it's once every 6 days for 60 minutes. So by the end of the year, only 28 or 29 sessions is what they have. Sax is 1 session every 3 days, between 43 and 44 minutes. So multiply that by 2. So the amount of time that our students get in the instruction with art and music is just phenomenal. If you see what they've really done and look at the artwork and look at their performances. You will see performances later this year so you can see all their progress. I really think that the teachers are doing a tremendous job with the amount of time that they have with our students. Also elementary strings. Elementary strings students meet once a week for 45 minutes, and the amount of learning that takes place with those students is amazing, considering it's just a small amount of time and the amount of learning that takes place, picking up a violin, not even knowing how to hold it, and by the end of the year playing music on the 4 different strings. So I talked about Objective 1. Here are some slides that just represent Objective 2. When you walk into an art classroom, this is something typically what you would see. This particular photograph is from a 3rd grade art room where the students are learning how to create castles that show mood or feeling. So as you're looking here, you can see that there are some essential questions embedded. How do you notice How do artists express mood or feeling? How do castles are built from basic shapes? How do shape and detail express mood or feeling? What moods can I express as an artist? And for students that have a hard time remembering what different moods or feelings are, the teacher had listed some of them over to the side, and then the teacher has included basic shapes. This is just a best practice so our students can see if they're not really understanding when the teacher does a mini lesson. This next slide takes another step further. These are overarching essential questions posted in the rooms. The photo on the left, at the bottom, there are clues. At the very bottom, I don't think you can read it. Basically, these are clues. What materials do I use with different media? There are other questions. What does an artist do when they get stuck? You know, how do I persevere? How do I can't even read it. How do I reflect? How do I observe? How do I express myself? So overall, during the lesson, the teacher works with the students, and then the teacher goes from table to table and conferences with the students to make sure that they understand what they're doing. And through that conferencing, that students are able to really find out a way to express their voice and also be successful with whatever media they're working on. So I thought really briefly I would share just some slides of our student work in drawing. This is a first grade and second grade student. When you look at these drawings, you can see that they're drawing and they're painting the drawing in the second one. The student in the first grade is drawing flowers from observation. You can see that on the table there's the actual flowers, and then the student is drawing them. And then the second student is drawing and representing foreground, middle ground, and background. In addition, the students have created texture and depth of field. Here's the third grade students working on the castle project and fourth grade working on Alice. These are both drawing assignments. You can see that the students are creating value in their work. They have done a remarkable job of creating texture. If you look at the stones, you can see the different types of stones and the different shapes. If you look at the owl, you can almost feel the feathers if you were touching it. Also, you can get a good feeling of the students' mood when they were creating this work. Here's some examples of 5th through 8th grade. 5th on the first left-hand top, 6th on the right, then 7th on the left-hand bottom, and 8th grade on the far bottom. I just wanted to show you so you can see how the students really develop artistically through their K through 8 experience, and also how students are integrating the elements of art and principles of design into their work. And then finally here, just are some photographs from our high school student in the drawing program. By the time the students get to the high school, they're really looking at Bloom's taxonomy top tiers. They're doing a majority of the work is with evaluating, analyzing, and then obviously creating work. I'm very proud of our students and our teachers because, as you've just seen, they do a remarkable job when they're in their classes. So I also talked about best practices before being part of the second objective. Here you can see one of our teachers and how she does a museum walk with our students. At the end of each project, the students share their work. Sometimes it's on the floor, sometimes it's posted. The students go up to the work and they talk about what they see. And it's not just, oh, I like that, it's pretty. It's based upon what the concepts were for the piece. You know, the students might say, I like how you used line to show texture. You know, I think it's nice how you showed the middle ground and the birds flying in the background. It might be that I didn't like that because my favorite color isn't blue, because that's a cool color and I wanted to use a warm color. So we're teaching the kids how to use accountable talk as well. These museum walks are really related to the TEPL document, if you think about it. TEPL Domain 3, Indicator 8 is feedback. We want students to get feedback. We want our teachers to give our students feedback. So this takes it over to the far right column where students are giving each other feedback. And hopefully they can take that feedback, and by articulating it in someone else's work, then they understand what it is so they can put it into their own work. Similarly, Domain 3, Indicator 9 is metacognition. We want students to think like artists. We want them to plan like artists. So this really helps them understanding what it is like to be an artist. So when they sit down and create a piece of art, they're just not doing it randomly. They're really thinking out the process. They're sketching it. They're putting all the elements of art and principles of design about it. Also, they know that they're going to have to reflect about it when they're done. So it really gives them a seamless experience in their classes. So this is kind of the last slide that I wanted to share with the reflecting piece. We talked about how the students reflect when they look at each other's work. By the time they get to the high school, we have digitation portfolios where students will post their work and they will reflect upon their process as well as product. I just did some screenshots the other day and put these in here so you can see this, what they do. We also at the high school, we've experimented using Google Forms where students can go in based upon the rubric and scoring criteria. They can rate each other's work. We kind of like that because it really takes the personalities out of the picture and it's really just honest feedback to each other. We've also done at the middle school where they do walk around the room and they'll put Post-its, different colors for warm and cool feedback. You know, we try to take students getting defensive through the process and just make them feel comfortable. This is objectionable. It's not subjective. This is criteria based upon what you're supposed to be doing, learning with this particular, with this lesson. So it really makes it so the students can understand what they need to do to be successful. And also, just like I said before, it gives them the experiences of identifying it and then articulating it and then also integrating it into their own work. So this is the reason why I'm here tonight, really, if you think about it. This is the work that we've done. The last time I was here in August, we had 1 page of units that we have completed. I separated them into music and art. These are the UBD units that we've done. You know, I mean, you have to remember we had a year and a half where we were at a standstill, so we're not quite where we want to be, especially with the music classes. That being said, they've done remarkable work across the board. Moving forward, we want to really complete some more of the music tech UBD units, and it's going to be pretty easy because what we do with backwards design, we look at what the high school's doing, and we know what the students need to do when they get to the high school, so we go from there and work backward with our lessons. And then here are the art UBD units. These are all living documents. Everything is up on the Google Drive. So when we go through, we can make edits as needed as the teachers are working with the units in their classrooms. Also, the other forms that you saw, the essential drawing skills, and the actual UBD units can be changed. Eventually, they will be tied to the district website. It was quite a bit. We've been busy the last 2 years. And just some next steps. You know, we're fortunate. We only have 2 non-tenured staff in the VPA. That's phenomenal. At the end of the year, we'll just have 1 non-tenured staff. So we want to bring in the consultant and myself. We will work on training the new staff with the UBD format. We still want to align the units vertically to make sure that what you do through K through 12 really makes sense and is aligned. We'll continue writing scope and sequences at the elementary level and put them in SACs. Peer-to-peer observations, we do it a little bit, but I want to make it more formal where the middle school teachers are going down to the elementary school and vice versa. They can see what's happening in the classroom, what the students are doing, vice versa. I think it's important for the lower divisions to go up to the higher divisions to see, oh, well, this is what my students did, and this is how they got there. Videotape lessons for archival purposes, although I have to tell you, during the pandemic, we videotaped a lot of lessons, and we have those in our files. And you know what, it's really paid off because when students are having issues, when they're stuck, when a teacher is out sick, we can just pull up those videos now and show the students the content that they missed. And then we'll also continue to create anchor sets for our benchmarks. So the last objective was how did we get through the pandemic? And instead of talking, because you see I can talk a lot and I talk really fast, I had my elementary music teachers create this small video. And you can look at this video and see what's happening at the elementary classrooms. The same thing happened at the middle school. So just multiply it by, well, think about the middle school, think about a middle school student. So here we go, if I can get it to play. Does it come through the speaker?
Give me 1 second.
So it kind of just was the last 18 months in a nutshell, all right? Oh, no. We're not going to watch it again. Oh, my God. So the reason why I played that is to show you where we were, and the good news is we are in a really good place right now. Last Friday night we had Through Our Eyes opening up at the Carriage Barn where all of our 9 through 12 students exhibited their work. It's a great location right across the street or right across the field. If you get a chance, go see it. And for those of you with toddlers or with the Disney, love of Disney, the Little Mermaid's going to be here next weekend. Buy your tickets now. The last time we did a Disney production, Beauty and the Beast, we sold out all 3 performances. So I can promise you it's going to be a phenomenal production. And then the middle school is going to present Matilda April 1st and 2nd. It's a great time to really jump in and really embrace the arts and really start enjoying and just sharing the love of art and music. So that being said, I have one more slide just to show you some of the accomplishments that our students have done the last year. We have students that made the ACDA National Conference. That's the American Choral Directors Association. 2 high school students made the All-National Honor Choir. 1 student made the All-National Band. I'm not going to read through the whole list, but it's a very impressive list. We had students placing at the Connecticut Regional Art Awards and several awards at the theater for the Halo Awards. Also, if you go to New York City, you can see one of our former graduates on Broadway right now. He's in City Center. There's a show called The Life. And for those of you that don't know, it's a former graduate, but Michael McCuster, he's older now, but he has an Academy Award, and he went to New Canaan High School. So, the arts flourish. Wouldn't be possible without your support and also with some great music teachers that we have. So I'm sorry about the voice, but I think you got to adjust about the work that we've done. It's been a long haul, but you know what? They've done a lot of work, and we're just here to celebrate and share with you. So anytime you want to go through one of the schools with me, just let me know. I can set up and walk through and show you some of the classrooms and what's going on. I'm very proud of the work that our teachers have done, and also just support of Central Office and the Board of Ed. So I'll open up. Anybody's got a question?
Great. Thank you, Alan. And I just want to say, first off, just a special thank you because the work of the VPA area in the pandemic was incredibly challenging, and I know there were just so many limitations placed on you all, and the way that you rose up and the way that our kids were able to continue and flourish and sing and dance and perform and share resources in the art rooms was incredible. So thank you to you and the entire staff of New Canaan Public Schools. Questions, comments? Brendan?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Katrina's words and also say thank you for your energy. Every time you present to us, it's evident, and I think that permeates the entire, New Canaan Public Schools VPA. So we appreciate it. I just wanted to ask really 2 things. One, is there anything that we can do as a board to support, growth in VPA programming? And then second, and this may also be for Dr. Corenti, is there any sort of tie-in with our Innovation Center, anything that we can do there in terms of looking to, broaden art, probably more, 3D art, things like that in the, tech areas?
As far as, building the program, we were really stifled the last 2 years. Typically, we would be sending our middle school students to the elementary to make connections. We would send the band over so the elementary students could see what band sounds like. Same with choir. We're getting that back in place for this year. The middle school teachers, we have our high school teachers going over to the middle school classes, especially in music, where they're developing relationships and talking about what happens in a choir, band, orchestra room. I'm open to any other suggestions as far as building the program. We're very fortunate that it's pretty robust. We continue to write curriculum and develop new courses. We presented at the CLC earlier this year. We're creating and aligning the Filmmaking 2 course with the UConn early early college credit course, where the students taking the filmmaking class will get college credit for it. So we're putting things in place for that. As far as the innovation lab, I have met with Jen Pacelli, and the art teachers met with her at the February 18th PL Day, and we're looking to see how things align. There's some really great units that they're doing in the lab. We just have to figure out how it really aligns with the curriculum that we have. I know in the past we've had 5th grade students drawing 3D pieces in the art classroom, and then they go to the STEM fabrication lab and they print their piece that they design. So we're trying to make those connections. It's just, we need time to meet and to plan. Jill, do you have any other?
No, I think we're just continuing to investigate and explore all the opportunities. We're looking a little bit at the VR right now, and some of the opportunities that are there. And I think the 3D printing is one area that we're really exploring. So we're excited.
Other questions or comments? Great. Thank you for being here with us. I appreciate your presentation.
So maybe I'll see you at the Little Mermaid or Matilda.
So I just want to share briefly, just while Alan packs up, he's not exaggerating when he talks about Beauty and the Beast. I remember the hallways filled, the kids everywhere. It was absolutely sold out all through the weekend. It was wonderful, and I'm just remembering as I'm listening, Alan, to all of what you're doing. I guess it was about 12 years ago now when I first came down to New Canaan. I was so impressed by having a visual and performing arts director. And I remember speaking with David Abbey, superintendent at the time, and the way he described it was, we're moving from Sparta to Athens. And it just fit. And to hear the purposeful approach that you and your staff have been taking to developing this program for children as they go through our program and go up into the high school, it really does result in amazing outcomes. But the process itself, I know, also brings a lot of joy along the way. So just want to say thank you for the really thoughtful approach to building this program. And I know you focus on a couple of areas, but across the board. And it's a team effort, and as you said, you've got a great team.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would add to that, because I agree, just in my own observations, but just the breadth and depth of not only the curricular, but the co-curricular programs. You really see just how the foundation within school builds to these amazing, the high level of participation out of school in all of the co-curricular programs. The demand is, I imagine, pretty high, and I wonder if we're even able to meet the demand at this point.
It's hard because, especially at SACS with some of the drawing classes, first semester we had 50-some students sign up for one of the drawing classes, and the rooms only hold a certain amount of kids. Mm-hmm. So that's a good problem to have. The musicals are doing great. If you're not familiar, the high school, they have an art club. Next year we'll have a ceramics club. We have a film club. They do a film festival where they have students from other DURG and other Fairfield County schools submit films. There's a viewing night where the films are adjudicated and the winning films are displayed. We're trying to decide whether we're going to do that here across the street, but it's really, it's great for the students. There's something for everyone. Mm-hmm. And if not, we'll figure out what that would be and we'll get that in place. So thank you.
Right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks.
All right. Next is COVID update.
All right.
A lot has changed. Yeah.
It does, right? And for the better, I think. So you have in your packet just a couple of slides. We had talked before about the data points we would use. So I just thought we'd ground our conversation initially just in looking at a couple of things. I'll share a couple of insights as we go from there. But the first page is the year-to-year COVID case rate comparison. And what's stunning, I think, there is certainly the January to February move, right? Where we're following a similar kind of pattern of last year of when it rose December, January, and came down February. But just the intensity of the case count in January. And as you see, in February, we've really leveled off to about where we were a year ago at the same time. And so far in March, we're looking at 7 cases so far throughout the entire month. We were getting that every hour or so back in January. So really, we expected it to happen this way, and it's nice when it when it happens the way that you plan, which, we knew Omicron would come on hard and fast and hoped that it would go away just as quickly, and it did. So those are the numbers we're looking at right now, very positive there. If we jump, the next page is the student absences, student attendance. And again, as you see, as we've gone through January, we started to level out. I don't want you to be alarmed with the spike. That's the Friday before February break. Thursday before February break. So the Board of Ed has a policy, as I think you know, that if we have a week off, we try to also give the Friday off. And now I think people have taken to using the Thursday as their travel day. So, yeah, understand. So it is what it is. But we came back down. So we're seeing a real leveling out of the student attendance, which I think is another good sign. The third data point is the staff absences and fill rates.
Just is this consistent if we look to like 2019? Is like the somewhere in the 100 to 150 range?
We're still trending a little higher.
Okay.
But we looked back at 21. The problem there was the temporary remote and all of those pieces. So we're still trending a little bit higher, but definitely moving in the right direction. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. And the third is the absences and the fill rate. This is the January 2020, just as level set. This is our goal, to get so that it looks like this at some point again soon. Our staff absences were still a bit high. But you see that our, on the next page in 2022, so the 2020 is just a reference. You flip the page to the 22. We're still running a little high on our number of absences, but it's getting better. And the yellow line is the fill rate. And again, that's also improving. So we're moving in the right direction. This is probably a little bit of a lagging indicator, as you might imagine. People, it can be 10 days or so if people are sick and different things. And we are also in flu season, right? So there's other things going on too. But it's getting better, and that's the point.
Was the higher?
It's okay.
Thank you. Was the higher sub rate? You think that drove this? I mean, this is lower. The fill rate's way lower than 2020, even pre-COVID, right?
Right. Well, we want the fill rates to be high across, right? We want the yellow line to be as high as possible.
Oh, this is not filled.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yep.
I thought it was like what you need to fill, 40%.
No, that's the fill rate. So we have if it's at 60%, we had 40% unfilled. We filled at 60.
That's
right. So we're not quite there yet.
It didn't work.
Well, it's too soon to tell. Yep. But I did tell my colleagues about it on a call on Friday, and now they're all grumbling about making the same change. So if everyone makes the same change, it might not make a difference. I don't know. We'll see.
Right.
Well.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah, I should have maybe not told them, but but we'll keep an eye on it. Hopefully it'll make a difference. I don't know, Dar, if you've seen anything anecdotally in the short term.
The only thing that I would add is we are seeing an increase in elective surgeries for our staff members. So people that may have put off knee or hip surgery, there's a little bit of a surge in that area. So that has something to do with the teacher absence rate.
Okay. Yep, driven probably by hospitalizations and availability of space in the
definitely.
hospital.
So those are probably harder to fill because those are multi-week
Yes.
absences, yeah.
Okay. But I think the big takeaway on all the data points is it's all trending in the right direction. Some may take a little bit longer than others. Like we said, the Omicron was like overnight when you go from January to February into now. The absences and those rates, we'll keep an eye on it and keep working that way. But so when we came back from winter break, as we had discussed, and I know you've seen the plan and gone through it, but we have returned to full capacity in the cafeteria, capacity at the plays, again, get your ticket early. Our athletic events, evening events at the school. The high school last week had their 8th grade not moving up ceremony, but 8th grade orientation program. Great feedback on that. It was very well attended. Even people without 8th graders sort of came and checked it out, and we're kind of walking around. Our students were here, our staff were here, and it really was a great night. So went very, very positively. We've got our meet and greets starting this week, South on Wednesday night, and then next week we've got East and West, and then the week after that we've got SACs in 2 different waves for SACs, 5th and 6th, and then 7th and 8th. So opening those events up as well. Same with our daytime meetings at the schools. Again, the high school led the way with that too, with their PTC meeting, or PFA meeting. where it was people came in, they talked for a little bit, they got to meet the administrators sort of face-to-face, then they did a quick tour around the building in small groups led by the assistant principals or the principal, a few others. Again, great feedback around that. We're getting our volunteers back up. Co-curricular programs, some of you heard Alan talk about that, sort of getting right back in the swing with all of those. We're planning field trips and assembly programs, and teams are commingling as appropriate as they had before, going back. So really, it's a window of opportunity, and hopefully it stays open forever, and so we take it, and that's what we're doing. Some of those changes. Now, the CDC has changed or published a new, I should say, I guess, way of kind of tracking what's going on in different towns, and they're doing it by county, updating it weekly. And according to their tracking system, Fairfield County, obviously us, we're in the green, which is the lowest level, and so we've changed the Charting Our Course website and all of that to reflect all of those changes. And we do continue to put up on that website new communications from the DPH or the SDE or others, just as a place for people to be able to go if they want to see. So things about athletics and VPA and other pieces like that, as they're published, are all put together on that website. And that's where we are.
Can I make a quick?
Thank you. Julie?
So I was lucky enough to be able to volunteer at West last week for the first time, and it was amazing. And I think the picture was posted in the Friday news or the Friday folder. And I had so many parents reach out to me and just say, like, when can we get in? When can we help out? How do we sign up? So I don't know if that's done through the PTCs or the principals, but I would encourage them to really just over communicate, because parents are dying to get back in there, whether it's lunch duty or library, whatever it is. There's a lot of interest.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot more interest than there is ability. So yeah, we've typically done it through the PTCs. I think we'll continue, and I do hope that the meet and greets, when folks get into the building and are able to kind of walk around, and the way those are being organized there'll be some classroom time, some together time to hear some announcements, and then some touring time to go around the building a little bit and see. So hopefully that helps too, so people feel they get to see the inside of the school, inside of the classroom, sit at their child's desk, and talk to the teacher a little bit. So, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for the update.
Oh, my pleasure. It's nice to get good updates.
On the good news train. So next is the budget update. So Dr. Lutze and Dr. Keating, I think, have a couple of updates for us. As you know, we are in the middle of the board process with the Board of Finance, and the Resources Committee met on Friday with members of the Board of Finance, the liaisons, and we discussed the Internal Services Fund, and there was some updated communication over the weekend, and I'll turn it over to both of you to.
I'll start briefly, and I know when to defer to experts, so glad to do that. But just to share, we did have an opportunity to meet with liaisons from the Board of Finance on Friday with the Resources Committee. After a very, I think, positive experience with the Board of Finance for our initial meeting and presentation of the budget, and we've gotten very positive feedback really across the board for the items that are in the budget, and very strong support for everything in our budget from the Board of Finance, which is great. The conversation continues to be around the insurance and the funding of the insurance. And so in our meeting on Friday, Todd and the Board of Finance liaisons shared their thinking about reducing the appropriation by a certain amount, and therefore asking the board to reduce the amount that it's keeping in reserve for the insurance. And we thought what could be helpful tonight, sort of going into a little bit of detail about how the insurance plan is built. Because as a self-insured plan, it's a system that's been built around several different components of that plan that sort of reinforce and interact with each other, which leads us to sort of to ask for what we ask for in our requests and to kind of plan the way that we do around supporting this. So it's when you're thinking about a system, and I wouldn't say it's overly complex, but when you think about a system with multiple inputs that sort of are reinforcing, it's challenging to consider adjusting one without really thinking about how it would then interact with every other component of the system, right? So we thought that it just might be helpful to level set sort of on how our insurance plan has been designed, and then we can talk a bit about the consideration from the Board of Finance, if that's all right.
Okay. I know we've had this conversation a few times, so please indulge me. We thought it would be helpful just to go over the big picture of how this fund is actually put together. Each year we start with calculating and defining what the expenditure piece of the fund is going to be for the next year. The biggest piece of that is the claims, and we rely on Joe Spurgeon, who is what we consider an expert consultant to get us through to the numbers that we need to ask for from the town. The reason why we consider him an expert is because he's an actuary and an underwriter. He's worked for Anthem for many years prior to becoming a consultant, and so he has an in-depth knowledge of the numbers. He looks at the claims history. He knows who's going to be remaining on our plans, and he does a formulated calculation that is grounded in sound theory for an actuary. I mean, he knows what he's doing, basically. Of course, that's based on historical information, and until we actually live through it, we do not know exactly where it's going to come out. So the piece that we wrap around that to give us coverage for the risks that we take on is our aggregate stop loss and our individual stop loss insurance that we write. We're currently with Voya. For the last 2 years, we have had some adverse experience. Prior to that, we had many years of good experience. The insurance companies were actually benefiting from that, writing that risk or taking that risk for us. The last 2 years, that's not the case. When we write our insurance, it's $300,000 per individual, and it's 120% of expected claims. When we go into the budget season, we do not know whether or not the insurance company is going to agree with us on what the expected claims number is going to be. So that is actually determined in May, early June, when we bid out our insurance with the town. And so we'll be doing that, the next few weeks we'll be getting that bid document put together. Joe works with the town's consultant, Larry, and they put that out on the street, and they try to attract as many bidders as they can. Now, we have a positive thing with Voya, who is our current insurer, and that in the contract they cannot increase our premiums by more than 50% of the prior year. So that's a safeguard for us. Last year when we went out, almost everyone was 100%, at least 100% over on our prior years. And so we had that, fortunately, that language in there. But regardless, we do expect at least a 50% increase if we stay with Voya this year. That's part of the calculations of the number this year, which is about $500,000. So with that said, the board's risk in this calculation, the Internal Services Fund, is 40% of the 20% corridor, which amounts to about $1.1 million. Could go up to 1.2 next year based on the claims projections. And so when we put the ISF together, we calculate our expenditures, as I said. We subtract from that our employee contributions and anything that we get from our retirees and people who are on COBRA. And the net amount is what we ask for from the operating budget. If we have fund balance that carries over from prior years, we offset that ask by the amount of carryover. And that has been our process for 7 years that I've been here. It's worked well. A few years ago, the town asked if they could assume 60% of the reserve and give us 40%, which at that time reduced the amount that they needed to allocate to the board by some $500,000. And we agreed to that because we felt that that $1.2 million that resided in the fund was adequate to cover any overages that we might incur. We all know what happened with COVID and how that impacted the fund, so we don't need to go through that. But what we would like the board to know is this past year when we closed, Joe was within $100,000 of a $13.2 million projection on claims. This current year, even with the addition of the $1,977,731 special appropriation last year, we still will require an additional $500,000, which you'll see in our transfer request in a little while in the statement of accounts. Last year, when we had put our budget together, we were actually up $500,000 from what we settled on. So Joe, again, will be right in that neighborhood of where our claims are expected to come in. Of course, we have 4 more months to go, but they are tracking pretty much to that number, the revised number of 14 million. So what I wanted to do for you today is, so at any rate, so that's how we put together the fund. Last Tuesday, we went to the Board of Finance meeting, Brian, myself, Jill, Katrina, and Dan, to talk about capital. But when we were there, we learned that, first of all, the town did support our non-internal service fund budget at 100%, so which we genuinely appreciate. However, they took $1.3 million out of the internal services fund, and they had their thinking on that. But we rely on what's worked for us for the past 7 years, and it's worked well for us. So $1.3 million is a lot of money. It eats right into the entire reserve, and it's short by about $200,000 if we stay there. So we did meet on Friday. I put together this sheet for you. Take a look at that. Taking the $1.3 million out of our request, and just showing you where the numbers are going to come out. One of the things we discussed on Friday was that we have this amount of money in our current budget for start and end times, the 463. And I asked the town if they had considered that when they put together their projected end balance for the town as a whole. And they said they hadn't. And so we talked about putting that money, transferring that money out of our budget this year into the ISF. So that'll help us. That'll take care of about a little bit less than a third. It still creates a shortfall of $836,663. If the board continues with the methodology to use the actuarial numbers that were provided by our consultant and the reserve funding policy that's currently in place. So that's what the board needs to consider tonight. Does it make sense to modify that policy, or does it make sense to continue with the process that, quite frankly, has worked? Last year, we did have this conversation with the Board of Finance. It went on for quite a while. It is the same conversation, to be honest with you. And when I look at the numbers last year, the Board of Finance was able to come to terms with this and understand our position, the board's position on this. And they did allocate the appropriation of the $1,977,000. It was our hope this year that that same process would be followed. You can speak to the email that you received earlier today, but it seems like they're going to deviate from that, or they'd like to deviate from that a bit.
And just to emphasize, when you create plans like our insurance plan, there's always a risk. We're running an insurance company. With that $300,000 individual stop loss means that any one person can go up to $300,000 in expenses, and everything above that is covered, which by comparison is a pretty significant amount of risk in a Board of Education self-insured plan. When we talked to Joe, the town's individual stop loss, for instance, is $100,000, I believe. So ours is $3. And so when we build the plan and do the projection, Joe looks back and does a deep dive on who went over in the last year. Will they still be on the plan? Are they going to be carrying forward, or looking to see if anyone's close, to see if there could be something emerging, whatever. So in the projections we have, he's assuming one person who may hit that individual stop loss. If 3 more do, that's an additional $900,000. If 3 hit unexpectedly. So there is risk built into the plan by that high individual stop loss, and it's high because it saves us money to be high. right? We pay less for that than you. And really, we've talked a couple of times through the years to Joe and others about could we bring this down? And it really is cost prohibitive to do it, because given where the experience we've had and where you just really couldn't. That occurred actually starting in maybe 2012, where we were at 150, it was moved up to 225, it was moved up to 250, moved up to 300. So that sort of was in communication with the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen, who were asking us to make some of those changes too. So that corridor becomes the reserving in the corridor is I think even more important, because the risk is greater, because the individual stop loss is higher, because we pay less in order to be at the 300,000. So when you talk about sort of how the system all works together, that's the part of what I mean, what we mean by that.
Brian?
Yeah.
Excuse me, I did include at your, where you're seated, Joe's calculation, and you can see that we shifted a few years ago from a conservative trend to a moderate trend, and it's become even, I think I would say, more drifting towards a more aggressive trend, because this current year we've had 4 high claimants, and next year we're putting in 1. So as we move forward, it's going to be very important that we coordinate with our stop-loss carrier to ensure that we are covered through the maximum risk corridor.
Bob, you had a question. Did you have a question?
No, I was saying there's 5, right?
Oh,
Am I reading that right?
5 high. Are you looking at claimants?
The projection for 22, 23?
Yeah,
He probably dropped 1 off.
2 and 3? No.
Oh, that's actuals.
Yeah, those are actuals.
From
Yeah,
this year.
yep.
Right.
So currently,
Yeah.
So what he does when he does his calculation is he pulls out 100% of the actual claims,
And then adds back.
and then he adds 300 back in.
Yeah.
right.
Okay, so all the numbers have been moderated to a net stop-loss reimbursement.
Right, so that's the 2.5 for those 3. Those are actuals this year. He pulls out to make the projection, then adds back the 1.
And adds back 1. Oh.
Yeah, yeah.
Brendan?
Oh, sorry.
I mean, just as I was part of the conversation on Friday, I mean, I think unfortunately, this is kind of Groundhog Day without Bill Murray, of the conversation that was had last year around, just not fully funding the ISF because the town believes that they have adequate reserves to, fund what the Board of Ed needs. The problem is, the Board of Ed can't just rely on a contingent appropriation that the town could make in the future. We can't do that. We made that determination last year. We had the advice of council in doing so. So what we're looking at now is if the Board of Finance says we're reducing your budget by $1.3 million, we'd have to reduce our overall budget by $836,000 unless we want to just take more risk on our insurance plan, which to me doesn't make sense. We've done that, as Joanne said, through going from conservative to moderate. We've been using Joe and taking his advice for many years, and that's served us well. What we have heard from the Board of Finance is that they don't want to overtax the residents of our town, which we totally agree with. And the way they can resolve that is through taking amounts out of the general fund and using that to fund a portion of our budget. That's 100% something that they could do, and that's what should be done if they don't want to tax, because they believe that when you combine the reserves that are available in town with our general fund, we have plenty of money. So that can be done, and for some reason the Board of Finance wants to, keep that in some other town account and not fund the Board of Education ISF fully, which is problematic for us because, you know, we're taking something that we have used for many years that has been adjusted, you know, to make it more favorable, I think, overall for the town and for the Board of Ed, you know, and really just, you know, cuts a huge chunk of what we're using as a reserve, moves it out from, you know, what we can access and, you know, puts it into a town account over which we just don't have control. So to me, it's problematic for the Board of Ed, and it doesn't change anything for, you know, New Canaan taxpayers at all.
And I would just add, just to be clear, because following the meeting on Friday, we discussed, you know, some different, you know, mechanisms for funding, including using the general fund, and we talked about a couple of different ways potentially that could be done, including a special appropriation like they did last year of the $1.9 million. And then the view is that they are fully funding the budget because the reserve, what they're proposing is that the reserve would be held fully in the by the town. So the issue for us is that we have a policy in place that we've used for a long time, and I think that's been sort of the focus of the conversation over the last, you know, year and a half. And so the goal tonight is really to understand from the board its position, feedback, and really to ask questions. And maybe, Joanne, you could just share a little bit more information about how, what the funding mechanism is according to our policy and how we would fund through the reserve if needed.
Sure. Last year when this came up, Lunda and I had several conversations about the mechanism. So let's say we go through our reserve and we are not funded. $2 million was a huge hit, and we would need that money at some point. So how would we go about doing that? And what Lunda concluded, and I'm not an attorney, but I read the charter and I agreed with him, is that a special appropriation would be required. And that requires a process that takes about a month or so. And it starts with the Board of Finance. There are legal notices that go in the paper. It goes before the town council, and then I believe there's a waiting period after that. So in between that process, we would be going through our reserves. You know, you would be using your reserves for funding just claims as they were coming in. So that would be the process.
Yeah. Okay.
And excuse me, Joan, just for perspective, when we get into the late spring and the summer months, you know, what might a month look like as far as amounts? You know, we talk about $1.1 million as a reserve. That's the 8% overall, or, you know, that's the 40% of the 20%. But, you know, I know some of the months can run pretty high.
Right. One of the things we did talk about on Friday was, you know, if there's a lot of concern about whether the number's right or wrong, we have the option, I believe, and this would have to be agreed upon before we could move through our budget cycle at the end of the year. But, you know, once the books are closed, we'll know whether or not we have money in the reserve. We don't have enough money in the reserve based on the policy. You know, the books will be closed and we'll have the actual numbers. Mm-hmm. At the same time, we'll know what our corridor is for the aggregate stop loss, because we will have at that point in time written that insurance. So we'll have the actual numbers. And Joe suggested this actually on the call, you know, when we had the meeting on Friday. Why not get those actual numbers with the commitment that if we need that special appropriation, as we believe we do, whatever that number is, that special appropriation will be made. And I believe with that commitment from the Board of Finance, even though it does have to go through this process, it will take place early in the budget year. The board can go on to other things before 2 months go by and they get back into the budget season again. And, you know, and just go on with the budget year. And that's what we've done this year. That would be my suggestion if they're really that concerned about the accuracy of the numbers.
Yeah. I thought it was a good suggestion. I mean, the key is that as a board, we cannot knowingly overspend our budget. We cannot by state statute. So, you know, enter the risk management strategy we have in place with the ISF. So I think that's, the point of concern here. And what's always been for many years, many board members before us, the key concern around the importance of the policy regarding our ISF. Questions? Thoughts?
I would just add, finally, that I do believe in the reserve policy. I think it works for us. The flip between 60-40, the board was concerned at that time. I supported it because I felt that we could get through a critical situation because of the 40% without having to worry about running a deficit. I think what we have works, and I would encourage you to consider just staying with what we have.
And again, not to belabor the point, but the timing is important as well. Because we have, Cigna as our insurer, we have Voya as, or whoever may be in the future for the aggregate stop or the individual stop loss. So can be a time period, a gap of 2 months, even longer, between having to pay the full cost of a procedure versus getting reimbursement for everything above $300,000. So we've had some procedures that have been well in excess of $1 million through the years, and it could be a couple of months. So that's another reason why having some reserve is important for cash flow purposes, because otherwise you're running in a deficit for that period of time.
Are those standard terms, like 60 days? Can we change that?
Because they're different companies, right? If it was all Cigna, then it would all happen differently.
No, when you
but
go
they've got-
negotiate stop loss, right?
I'm not sure if is it in the policy itself? I'm not sure.
So generally speaking, it's a two-step process. So when we have a claimant that goes over 300, there's a negotiation process that takes place between Cigna and the provider. And sometimes, and we've learned this past year, that can take months to get a claim that's 1.5 down to 900,000. And then it goes over to Voya, who usually pays within 30 days. I mean, they're pretty good, sometimes less. But it's that intermediate stage with Cigna, and that's important for them because it's not just our claimant, it's what they pay for all their claimants in similar situations on those type of services. So they do have a vested interest in making sure that they get those claim numbers down to where they feel that they're appropriate. So that is why the process is prolonged at times, but in the meantime, we've paid out some money on claims, and so it's just a timing issue.
We also sometimes have to pay up front, right, for certain procedures. So it's not like, we're getting billed 30, 60 days after a procedure. It's, a lot of money out the door.
Yeah, we get a lot of credits that come in.
Yeah, so it's important that we have, cushion there to pay when we need to.
Can you maybe just walk through the sheet here, this one? Just the kind of year over year to, I guess maybe from 2021 actual, where you've got your fund balances, your 60% that I guess changed to 40%, and kind of how that plays through to the 2023, because
Right.
I think we're working off of the 1.162 million number, and then, but that's where we're 836,000 short.
Mm-hmm.
But that's at the 40% threshold, right?
Yes, yeah. Sure, so if you go down for 2021 actuals and just let your eyes drift like midway through that column where it says fund balance designated to supplement claims, it was $4.2 million. So that really leads into the budget projection for 2022. In our budget process, we had planned to use $2.4 million roughly. What the town did was they took an additional $2 million out, or 1.9. And so that is what created this big gap that we had going into 23. The town, I mean, quite frankly, when I saw that they were coming up with $13,384,033 at the top of 23, I was encouraged to see that without knowing that they weren't really going to entertain a special appropriation. Because I thought that, in my mind, given what we went through last year, that would be, the natural process of getting us through this budget cycle. So, again, our claims over in 2021 were 13.3. The budget was 13, as you can see, if you net out 14.6 and 1,337,000, about 13.3. The budget was 13.2. So the claims budget and the actuals were pretty much right on. If you go into our budget for this year, it's 13, the budget was 13.4, so very close to what our actuals came out last year, 13.3. But in reality, the reforecast, and this is, we talked about this during budget, we expect them to come in at 14 million. So there's a gap there of 600,000. So we wouldn't, if our operating budget, if for everything else was spot on, we would have to request that in our 23 budget, that shortfall, to restore our reserves. But because we had money available to reallocate to the fund through a transfer, we asked for, the only amount of that we asked for was $66,000, I believe, if I can track it down here. Oh, I changed all of the numbers to agree, but we were able to fund the difference.
Statement of accounts?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's how it kind of works. I mean, our claims numbers, as you can see in 2020, fell off the cliff because of COVID. But since then, we've normalized, if this is normal. So the contributions from the operating budget have fluctuated because of the reserves that we had. So if looking across, but each year we net out our revenues to our expenditures, whatever the difference is. We look to see what we need to change for the IBNR. So that's the incurred but not recorded or reported. In 2020, because claims went down, the IBNR went down. However, last year, because the claims went up, the IBNR went up. So we have to cover that. And then you just take a look going down, and you basically balance into the next year's operating budget by considering revenue, expenditures, and any available fund balance. So the calculation has been fairly straightforward all along. And again, the reason why we're short going into next year is because of the reserve and the reduction of 1.3 million. Now, we could have a situation at the end of this year where we have $200,000 left in the fund, let's say, after we close out June 30, 300, some, I'm just saying it could be some number. But how Voya comes in and says, we think your claims are going to be higher than 14.5 million, and we're not going to insure you for at 14.5. We're going to insure you at 15 million. I mean, that's a possibility given our claims history. That needs to be considered.
So if we were to ask if the special appropriation for the full amount would be the 1.1 or the 836?
The 836, but what I'm suggesting is that if it makes sense to this board, we just wait till the summer, get the actual numbers. I mean, if you're comfortable doing that, I want to make sure you're comfortable doing that, but
Yeah.
you'll know exactly what the number is.
Why wouldn't we be? What's the risk?
That the town won't agree to a special appropriation.
Yeah, that's.
What have they said they would?
We discussed it, but the proposal that came back was not that solution. Brendan?
Yeah, I mean, what we hear from the Board of Finance in these conversations is that they want to fully fund our budget. They're supportive of it. But they don't want to overtax, our residents. So those two things actually can go together. They can fund this $836,000, and they can fund it out of the general fund, because they believe the general fund plus all the reserves in town, including our reserves, are too much in aggregate to hold.
Mm-hmm.
That's what should be done. They should just fund the 836, and then we've done this every year. We've said, as Joanne said, later in the spring, when we know what the numbers are with more precision, we can bring the number down, right? We can true it up. Hopefully it doesn't have to go up, but, usually the past has shown us that it possibly could come down, and then we reduce our budget by whatever that amount is. It's $100,000 or whatever the number is. That's what should be done, which again aligns what they want and what we need to have a fully funded budget. Why that isn't the solution, I don't know. They want to hold this $836,000 on the town side and leave this, leave our reserve as a paltry number of like $250,000 or $300,000.
Yeah, we've discussed, the special appropriation as an option going forward. I mean, it was sort of a surprise last year. It was, got the job done, but we talked about going into this year that, should we discuss that as a more formal, formalizing the process? I mean, Bobby had some ideas around timing and formalizing the timing of that. When do we bring the number forward? When do we fund it? And I think, if that is indeed the direction we can go in, at least people can become accustomed to looking at our budget and our totals in that light, that the special appropriation is the difference.
Can we get them to do like a resolution that would say they'll fund up to this 836 pending like a true-up? So it's a guarantee to us that they'll fund this, and then they work it out, they work out the difference at actuals time. Like, why wouldn't something like that work?
I mean, that is.
And that's kind of what you're saying, right?
Yeah, except not through a special appropriation, because there's no reason to do that. If you're going to fully fund the budget, and we've also said if the number comes down in the spring, it will come down. We'll agree to that. We're not going to ask for more than what we need. That has been the solution in the past, putting aside last year. Last year when they came to us and said, well, we're just going to take $1.9 million out, we said, well, we're going to have to cut $1.9 million out of the operating budget. Right. And they said, whoa, we'll do a special appropriation. That's one of the reasons why the year over year looks so screwy this year, right? I think the right thing to do going forward is to fully fund the budget, if that's their intention, which they've said it is, and pull money out of the general fund if they don't want to tax for it. It's pretty straightforward.
It's just two different pockets, right? Like
right.
Putting it in one, putting it in the other.
Exactly.
I don't know.
Can I ask a
Yeah,
couple of questions?
absolutely.
So, and I'm not suggesting we do this, but just so I understand the levers, if we were to move from moderate trend to aggressive trend, this 836 would go down,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
By about, 185,000 or so. And then maybe just so I can kind of understand, so I see the insurance reserve policy. What was, in theory, you could say you want it to be 100%, right? I guess it was 60/40 and then it flipped to 40/60.
So
Like,
before
how
the
do we-
policy, it was 100%.
Okay.
And there were a lot of conversations about it, and
We held 100%.
we held, yeah, in the ISF, there was 100% there. And then in conversation with the town, and they were saying that we didn't need 100% and could it be a different number. So that's where this policy was developed to say, okay, if we felt that 60% was enough to hit any unanticipated contingency and would give us enough heads up that if we had to hit the 60%, we would have time to go and let them know about the 40% to get whatever. And then it was flipped in 2021, which does sort of make sense in a way, because as the cost of the plan has gotten more through the years, it's increased, the amount of the reserve has increased. So to flip to 60/40, at 40%, we're probably still holding about the same amount that we would have been at 60% with a lower number. So it kind of worked to do that.
How many times have we triggered it? Ever?
We have used the reserve.
And how was that process? Like, did it work?
Well, we had the one in the fund, and then we went, because what happened was, as Brian was saying, we were holding the reserve. The board was holding the reserve in the ISF for the BOE. And what happened was the Board of Finance felt that the funding from the operating budget was too high, and it was based on the calculation we're doing now. But they weren't taking into account the excess reserves, the reserves over the 100%. And so the Board of Finance made the decision for a few years that they would fund us at $10.5 million consistently for several years. until we actually leveled out, which happened. And so that was the last year. But keep in mind, too, though, that over the last 5 years, we've had significant plan design changes that have saved us millions and millions of dollars. So we haven't, I mean, it hasn't been an issue. 2 years ago, all of the transition from the PPO to the HDHP occurred. I mean, we gradually brought in all of our staff, but that was it. And we met with the Board of Finance to inform them and acknowledge the fact that we were at a new plateau, and the savings we had enjoyed in the past were not going to continue unless there was something other big and wonderful in health insurance that we could save a lot of money with, you know. So, that is why we haven't had to worry much about the reserve number, so to speak, over the past 5 or 6 years. It's different now.
Is it fair to say, I mean, were we running the reserve at like a much higher number, right? Like
We were running the reserve at a high number because we were saving money in the plan.
Got it. So that's like this 5.9 million, 5.3, but then in 2021, we actually used 4.22 of it.
Yeah.
And does the Board of Finance generally, assuming we figure out the appropriation, do they want us operating more at this like $1 to $1.5 million level? Is that the target? Like when you say their
perspective,
too much reserves, is like
yeah. If I were to summarize, their perspective is, don't worry about it. We have plenty of money. Yeah, basically, we'll backstop you, and you know, but we can't
But that could be a plan, though, couldn't it? Why couldn't that be a plan? They do have plenty of money.
We could.
Like, as long as you have the mechanisms to get at it, no?
Right, well,
They could write an insurance policy theoretically.
But
for
what
the
if they
Board of
make this 0
Education.
instead of 40%, make it 0?
Yeah, but then we have to rely on going to them for that money throughout
But
the
it sounds
year.
like this says, maybe I don't understand, but it says, we'll transfer from the special reserve without delay. Like, so do they have a fund ready to go and they can just transfer the money or not? I'm sorry if I don't understand, but I'm
yeah,
just trying to.
that's a good question.
Right, so there's a legal process that the town has to follow, as we understand it, as I understand it, based on a lot of research last year, where they do need to go through an appropriation process. So that is a special appropriation process or whatever. It's not like I asked Lunda last year, I said, Lunda, are you comfortable? I mean, if you are, tell me, and I'll communicate that, but moving $2 million out of the general fund to our ISF without going through a process. And, you know, the answer that came back was he didn't feel he had the authority to do it.
And that was that we posed 2 questions back to the Board of Finance by email tonight. One was, what is the funding mechanism? What would it be? And what is the goal? The second question is, you know, what is the goal, or why wouldn't we appropriate from, you know, the general fund, as Brendan was saying? What is the goal of holding the reserve on the town side, which would require us to essentially change our policy that, you know, we've had in place, which is more complicated than just, you know, agreeing to it tonight, because it's a policy that's been in place for a long time. So, you know, those are all the considerations, and I know that they're, you know, hoping to vote, planning to vote on our budget tomorrow night. So, you know, I want to be able to provide some concrete feedback back to them for tomorrow night. Yeah, Brendan.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of rehash what happened last year, is when they came up with this $1.9 million of, you know, cut, at least as I thought about it, by not fully funding our ISF, we as a board said, well, you need to fully fund our budget, fully fund, that includes the ISF, and that resulted in them, you know, basically fast-tracking a special appropriation. So my suggestion would be, you know, for the board's consideration, that we do the same thing, with the result hopefully being the Board of Finance fully funds our budget. Again, a portion of that can come from the general fund so that we're not taxing, and not go through the special appropriation process. That's not our call, but it is our call to say we actually need this $836,000. Otherwise, we're, you know, breaking with the policy that we've had that protects the board and our employees and their health care.
Well, and there is a a functional reason why the special appropriation isn't a great approach for the board, which is it essentially removes that money out of the budget comparison year to year. So when we look at next year, again, it's going to create an artificial gap that puts us already, if it's 800,000, it's what, 0.8.9%.
Well, we're already doing that with the 463.
Yeah.
So it's really 1.3.
Yeah, 1.3, so it's over 1 percentage point. And I know that's mechanics and it's semantics, but it is all part of the conversation and trust people have in the work that we're doing in managing our budget. Right? So if you bake in a 1.1% increase right from the start, you're going to be higher than in the region, you're going to be among the highest again, which isn't correct.
And I think one of the questions, we could discuss is how much risk do we want to assume as a board? And, Dan, you were alluding to that in your question around, do we want to move more towards aggressive? And I think it's a good and fair question and a conversation, we could have. I think timing-wise, it's not ideal. I don't know that we're going to get to like a place where we're all comfortable signing on at this point. So, I think it's a conversation we should consider having. I think it, again, we discussed this last year. It's a conversation that should happen like off cycle of the budget, just to have, Joe in the room and really think through what does that mean. And given the accuracy of his projections the last 2 years, I think that's, speaks volumes to, sort of the credibility of those projections and the fact that, we use them in good faith because, they're generally very right on and close and make good sense based on the data and the access to the information he has and working with the insurance company so closely.
Right. So I just would add to that simply that the risk is actually, Joe's anticipated claims are what they are as he goes through and does his work, but ultimately the risk for the board and whatever is going to be determined by that aggregate stop-loss vendor and the number that they use, right? Because it's what they use to say, okay, we expect this to be your 100%. And then they create that, so we could, go to a more aggressive trend. But if they're looking at what we've done and they're go moderate, that corridor is going to be based on the number that they write the policy towards. Right. Which does again speak to, I think, the approach that Dr. Keating mentioned a little while ago, which was to whether we start with where we are now with an understanding that if we get a better number, then it goes down, and if we get a worse number, it has to go up a little bit. Like, we can adjust and flex that, because it really is, the money that goes into the Internal Services Fund is specifically for that purpose. Right? The money can't be used for anything else. It's used for insurance. So, we're just saying, this is what we need, this is why we need it, here's the math behind it, and, if there is an adjustment, we're glad to make it.
And just one further thing, consistent with our policy and practice in the past, we will, if there's funds available, if the 836,000 is too high by some chance, we will end the year with a surplus. We'll project that out to 24, and the budget will be reduced by that amount, or the board can make the commitment to send the funds back to the town, one way or the other. It will work the same way. We won't arbitrarily spend the funds. They're here, as Brian said, for the specific purpose of employee benefits.
So, I'm supportive of the suggestion sort of on the table that we've been discussing, and I think it's very transparent and it, funds to the need. Specifically, we present the numbers and, it's funded as such. I don't know how others feel or if there's other thoughts, comments.
So just so I'm clear, we're going to ask for the 836,663 or its equivalent as of later in the spring to be fully funded. Is that the proposal?
Yeah, I think it gets into how the money is sort of appropriated in the budget cycle, right? I think that's the number that would be included, as I understand it, and then we would go back and revise the number.
Yeah.
Based on
In terms of based on actuals, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're saying the same thing?
He's recommending it.
Yeah, and we discussed that on Friday a bit.
Yeah.
And that at least helps with their concern about the numbers aren't baked and it's like we might be overestimating some now, and if it comes down a couple $100,000, great, and if it shakes out higher or at the number, that is what it is.
Right.
Yeah, and we do typically take a second look. Joe goes back through all of the numbers second week or so of March, and it's before we're done with the town council that if the numbers have improved or changed, we let them know. You know, so we've got a little less trend at that point, a few more months of experience, and sometimes it can trend down. Yep, and that's what we've typically done in the past. We'll do it again.
What do we think the Board of Finance is voting on tomorrow then?
TBD.
Yeah.
Hopefully they're listening. And they're going to add this
We'll have some phone
836
calls in the
back
morning.
in.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it's good that we're making it clear as a board that we need the 836, or if it goes up or comes down, and that's what's necessary. And you know, hopefully they'll make the right call.
Yeah, and you know, again, we're open to continuing the conversation and to look for areas of compromise and, you know, how to do this better and easier going forward, because it's certainly been a difficult conversation in the last couple of years. So, you know, I would just echo that, like, we're open to continuing the conversation. We need the budget fully funded for this year, as we did last year, and, you know, we'll keep thinking about other ways. But I want to sort of step back from the whole, look at the big picture and say, you know, we are self-insured, and that has served the district and the town very well in terms of the $1 million we have saved. The other, you know, the alternative is very costly. So I think we just have to keep going back to the value of the plan and the sort of the effort it requires to manage the plan and, you know, assume the risk the way we do. So.
Can I ask a question about this reserve policy again? Like, what if they were able to change it, the mechanics of it, so you don't have to go through what they go through today? Like, actually put money in an account that's like pre-approved, I don't know what you want to call it, but, you know?
That's a BOE reserve account.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
You know what it is?
Right.
It's the
Well, that's
idea, though,
what's
it's in
silly
the other,
about-
I know
that's
it's
what's
so
silly
silly, but
about
it's
the
in the
whole
other
thing.
pocket, that's the whole point.
I know, but
Yeah.
that's what's so absurd about it.
I get it. But you know what I
If-
mean? Like, at the end of the day,
The
it's all
different-
tax money, right?
Yeah.
So.
No, the difference
I don't
would
really
be
care
if-
where it comes from, as long as we get it.
If there were a general fund, if there were a mechanic to literally to have us say, I need $1 million from the general fund to fund, you know, this
Right.
person's health insurance claim in, you know, May 2022,
Right.
and we could just do that,
Right.
then, you know,
Or similar,
theoretically,
right? Like, that's
yeah,
what I mean, like.
sure.
It's almost like you want the general fund to give us like a letter of credit that we can just draw
Yeah,
upon. when
kind
we
of.
want to.
Well,
I mean,
I just don't know if that's actually
So, yeah,
possible.
by
Probably
charter
not.
and even maybe
I don't
statute, I'm not sure that you can.
I don't
because
know,
checks
but
and balances, right.
maybe it's not charter or statute, but
Right.
if there's another way. I mean, sometimes it's just, you know, we do things because it's the way we always did it. So, like, if we can switch it up and make it somehow work for us and work for them.
I agree with you 100%, and that's the conversation I
I
think,
know.
you know, we can have, and we should have. It's just-
We need to pay our claims and cover our risk.
Yeah, I mean,
Those
at
are-
the end of the day, that's what has
that's
to
it.
happen, and I don't think anybody on this board or anybody on any other board would disagree with that.
Right.
And that's where, like, I don't think there's risk. I mean, I know there's risk in that, you know, but I don't feel like there's risk in that the town isn't gonna pay somebody's health care. It's just not, it's not gonna happen.
Sure.
So it's just a matter of figuring out how to make this thing work. Anyway.
Yep,
Thanks.
agreed. No, excellent. Okay. All right. To be continued.
Well, thank you.
A good conversation, and thank you, Dr. Keating, for taking us through it again. All right, moving on to the healthier start times update. Dr. Letzi.
All right, just a couple of quick things I just wanted to share with the board. One, the Right at School, that's the co-curricular program provider that we've been talking with and talking about. They held a webinar last week. They meant to do two, one in the morning, one in the evening. Unfortunately, the link for the evening one didn't work for some reason. So I wanted you to know, first of all, that we had a pretty good attendance. Well over 30 people were there at the 10 o'clock link for that discussion and to learn from them. But since then, we've had quite a few more people asking for a link to the webinar. So there seems to be quite a bit of interest. We're hearing from East, and Chris and I were talking today, the principal over there, about that. So that was positively received. And again, the whole idea around Right at School is just to add another sort of offering to the portfolio for families and students. So between that and the existing programs that are here, we're trying to make sure there's something for everybody who needs it. So they're looking at programming for the elementaries after school. looking at programming for 5th and 6th in the morning, prior to their start. And people ask questions about what about doing something at the elementaries before school? Or what about 5th and 6th after school? And we're open to all of that. I mean, if Right at School can do it, if it's financially a good move for them based on the interest, they'll go ahead and do it. And if they can't, we'll look at it as a district and see what we could do. We currently offer early birds for East and West. If there's a need for an early bird program, even in the new start times over at one of the schools or something, we'll figure out how to do that. So we want to make sure this works and support families that have those needs. They, given the interest in the webinars and all of that, Right at School is also coming to the meet and greets at the elementary schools and over at Saks. So they're going to have a table over at South on Wednesday night. They'll be at East and West next week and be at Saks for the 5th and 6th lower division event that they have there. So it's an opportunity for people to be able to talk to them and find out more. And the pricing structure and all that stuff is all there. The webinar also, we're sending out the link to the recorded webinar from that morning session. So anybody who wants to watch that can watch that. Oh, sure. Just again around start time, the buses are in the pipeline. So they're on track. The timing is looking like that's going to work out as expected. So that's good news. And in speaking with First Selectman and folks over in his department, we're thinking that a traffic study would be a good idea for Farm and South. Looking at sort of what does it look like at 8 o'clock, since we're shifting, the 7 through 12 to 8 o'clock. There's some traffic. It's a busy time on the roads already, and it'll be busier, more congested from our schools than it is now with South and the 5, 6 being at 8-ish. I think just because of the timing and also how it's going to work. So anyway, Kevin, First Selectman, he said he would pay for it. So glad for that. But we're going to get a traffic study together around Farm and South. We're going to look maybe even at 106. That came up this morning in a PTC meeting, that there's some congestion there, that maybe we can get a look at that too and see if there's any recommendations there. And they're going to look at the Tiger Trail, the egress that's there now, and how we're using that, and even see if another egress could be helpful, around that time of day. So where that might be. So they're going to come in and spend a couple of weeks doing a study there, and I'll report back and have the report shared with you, and we'll be able to discuss it then.
And it's probably different than the traffic study, but I know we had talked about it a little bit. Is there, at some point, are they going to spend some time looking at Saks in particular, just as related to some of the ingress, egress, in addition to just the other, more traffic in that surrounding area?
That's probably not this group.
Yeah.
But that's certainly something we can look into. Yeah. We've had somebody take a look at that for us before. We had TAS, Mark's group, right, take a look at that, and I'll look back at some of those recommendations too. It's pretty landlocked, unfortunately, with the fields right there and all, but
But even
some possibilities.
If there's any changes to the high school strategy, it could impact, that one exit from Saks, so sort of could impact it
Yeah.
potentially.
Yeah, we'll take a look at the report that was done a few years ago and see if that's something we want to add to or do something a little different.
Yeah.
Yep.
Erica?
For the Start Times Committee, is there going to be a restarting of meetings for that, and is there a schedule for that, and just a lot of the work that still needs to be done around sharing the new schedule, finding out how that impacts different community members, all of that work, getting that started.
Yep, so I identified somebody on staff as sort of a program manager a project manager that's going to help us with this bit. We're still sort of finalizing some of those details, so I think in the next week or so we'll have that kicked up and started again. That's one of the responsibilities in that role, is getting the committee off the ground again and hitting on a couple of the things that need to be done. Yeah, so that is in the works and happening soon. I don't have a calendar for meetings or anything like that yet, but the board will know about those meetings and will be invited to attend, as had been in the past.
All right. So we'll move on to our action items now. We have several. First is the adjustment to this year's school district calendar. You have an update on that.
Yep, do you want me to
Yeah,
discuss
please,
before the
go
motion?
ahead.
Sure. So what we've done, Board of Education has a policy that speaks to the third full week in June as being the last week of school whenever possible. Now, of course, you know, the state requires you to go right to the very last day of June if that's what it takes to meet the 180 days. But that policy, and the language of the policy is the third full week. For us now, as we looked at the calendar and we looked at the 4 days that we had to cancel due to weather, we kind of sort of looked out at the what the days were, and it brought us to a Tuesday in the fourth week of June. It's just not the fourth full week because of where June 1st falls, right? But we thought that given the year, given where we are, and the calendar and the pacing of things, we would propose what we've done several times in the past, which is to go from the 182 days that we build into our calendar to 180 student days, which means that the additional 2 days would be professional learning days for staff. So they would still be coming in on Monday and Tuesday, and we'd be working through how that time is spent. But our students' last day, if we go to the 180, which is the state requirement, the last day would be Friday, the 17th of June. And that would be a half day for all of our kids. Barring another cancellation, which, you know, these are plastic tables, but I'm going to knock on it anyway. Because the weather is warming up, I think we'll be all right. Yeah.
Stay on track. Exactly. Yeah.
Yep, so that's my recommendation in the proposal is to go to 180 days for our kids.
Okay. So I'll ask for a motion to adjust the 2021-2022 school district calendar to modify the number of student days to 180 with the current last day of school on Friday, June 17th of this year. Brendan, second. Dan, questions? Okay, all in favor?
You sort of have to if your kids are watching.
Yeah. So that was unanimously approved, which brings us to our next topic, which is setting a graduation date for the high school seniors.
Yep. Again, I'll speak just briefly to that. We typically pick a day, and then we need a second day for the rain date, in case we need it. Hopefully we don't. The statute is that the graduation date can be on or after the 180th day in your original calendar. So prior to the cancellations or whatever, which for us was the 14th or 15th, I believe. Was the 15th. So after talking with the high school, what they would like to have, what I'm requesting, is that we make Thursday, June 16th, the graduation date for the high school with the rain date of Friday, the 17th. And what they did last year, with great success, I think they're looking to do it again, was hold the graduation in the morning instead of in the evening. And that helped for a couple of reasons, not the least of which is weather-wise, at that time of year, it's often hot and humid. And so thunderstorms come rolling in the afternoons. So doing it in the mornings helped with that and the overall temperature and other things. So we don't need to, we don't get into that level of detail here, but it's really about approving the 16th as the date, which I know people will be happy to have that date so they can start making their plans.
Great. Okay, thank you. So motion to schedule Thursday, June 16th as the NCHS graduation date with Friday, June 17th as the rain date. Brendan, second. Erica, all in favor? Okay. And Thursday, June 16th it is. And then moving on to the future, our 2023-2024 school district calendar is before you for consideration.
That's right. So this would be a first reading tonight with a second reading at a future meeting, and this is for people who really love to plan. But we tend to lead the way in getting these calendars out, and other people, I think, use them to help in their districts. So what we're looking at here is very similar to what we've done in the past. And really, you're looking at the days around the holiday break is the significant. I guess a couple of points of note. By starting on Tuesday, the 29th, it gives our teachers 3 days preparation. It's spanning the weekend, and then students would come back in for 4 days, 4 more days, and then have the a 5-day week. We've done that before, I think with some success. I think it helps to sort of get our teachers to get in the pace of things. It helps to relieve some of that pressure as we go into those first days. We're maintaining the conference days in December for our K through 5 students and parents. And this schedule here, our last day of school is June 12th, which is a half day. We'd have a half day in November, half day before the holiday break. This is 182 days.
So the 12th is the 182nd day?
Yes. Yes. Oh, instead
Yeah.
of the 10. Yep.
Okay, and then this will come back at our next meeting.
That's right. And
So-
what we'll do is we put it on the website if people are interested to take a look and see when spring break and other things. If they have feedback, welcome to share it with us via email or what have you, and we can discuss again prior to approving. So we just need a first reading vote. Motion and a second for first reading.
Okay, yeah. Motion to accept as a first reading the 23-24 school district calendar as proposed. Erica, second. Bob? Okay, nope. All right, thank you. And next we have the statement of accounts, which Dr. Keating touched on earlier. So I'll go ahead and take the motion now and then, well, go ahead and present it and then we'll,
Okay.
yeah.
So you have before you tonight the statement of accounts through the end of January. The transfers included in this report conform to the reforecast that was in the 23 budget document. So this aligns directly to that report. I'm going to go through some of the transfers, but before I do that, I'd just like to bring to your attention that we're 47.7% through our budget expended, 43.7% encumbered, and we have 8.7% unencumbered, which is typical for this time of year. Of the encumbered number, 76.1% is salaries. So consistent with our budget split, our encumbrances are predominantly salary driven. Moving down to the COVID non-lapsing account, we started the year with a little over $300,000 remaining in that account from the prior year. We've spent $138,000, and our current forecast looks like we're going to end the year with about $50,000 left in that fund that will go back to the town. Flipping to page 2, this is the transfer that's before you to approve for tonight. There's 4 transfers between objects. The first one is a transfer for $496,505 to the employee benefits account from salaries. And this, as I stated earlier, is based on the reforecast of the ISF. We will need approximately $586,701. In addition to the $496,505, there was $21,934 within the fund. So that gap of 60 some odd thousand was included in our funding request for next year. And that's based on the formula that we use. A transfer of $455,850 to the property services account from purchase services and salaries. And the following needs were identified. Last summer, we had an unanticipated repair to the chiller here at the high school. The entire chiller went down. It was an $80,000 expenditure. We did receive some insurance on that, but this is the net. We hired a structural engineer to assess the roof of this school for a solar project. It's actually a 3-phase solar project. We have Z-Rex for 2 of them. The first is a small project on the auxiliary gym that will provide the energy needed to light the Dunning Field. The second is a 2-phase project of the main building. The first phase will take place this summer. We're currently out to bid. We're going to be opening a week from today. And that has to do with 2 solar projects, about $250K on each side of the building. So the structural engineer determines how much weight we can put on the building in the certain areas of the building. So we have 20 some odd roofs. They're all segregated and beamed. And so he tells us what we can do and where we can do it. During the budget process each year, we identify special projects for the subsequent year. So this would be 23. And if we have funding available within the budget in the current year, rather than going to the future budget, we include them in the reforecast. So for example, at East School, they have a number of toilets that need to be removed, replaced, and heating units in the bathrooms that need to be replaced and changed. Over at West, we have some carpeting projects. They'd like the library stacks relocated. At Saks, we have some repairs to the PA system. We have a concrete pad underneath the bus gate which is going to be part of our rethinking of that whole loop there at Saks for buses that needs to be done. So those are the kind of things that are below the capital threshold, but are things that need to be done. So that's part of this transfer. We acquired additional space over for the alternative program downtown, and that's $12,000 more per year. Our energy, even though we projected increased use for electricity and heating, the cost has gone up. We've had a cold winter this year, so we're looking at least $70,000 more in electricity and $78,000 in heating, and we're watching those numbers closely because the price of gas has gone up quite a bit. The natural gas, vehicle repairs, and we had some savings in other accounts within that object of $12,000. There's a transfer of $43,393 to supplies from purchase services, and that's strictly for technology. When we went one-to-one, our budget was not adjusted to reflect the many replacement parts and use, so that is also going to be used. There's funding in there also for the acceleration of some VR and AR devices for the Innovation Center over at Saks. And then finally, there is a transfer of $232,141 from equipment to equipment from contracted services. The document reproduction equipment is hitting some of it, a small portion of the fleet, but the bigger workhorse machines, bigger high-volume copiers are up for replacement. The total replacement cost is close to $200,000. We've picked the most needy equipment, and we've put aside $120,000. There's classroom furniture that would have, and incidentally, this equipment would have gone into next year's budget if we didn't have money in this current year's budget, which would have increased our request from the town. So then the classroom furniture at Saks, there's a replacement program that we have in place. We talked about it about 2 years ago with the board. We're in dire need to replace some of the equipment in that building. And this was ergonomically more comfortable for our students and appropriate for collaboration and so forth. South, the $23,000 is to replace hard plastic chairs with a softer plastic chair for all of the grades in South. The other two schools have these already. Then there's just a variety of equipment at the high school that was asked for. And then with regards to visual and performing arts, this is to transform Anna Moody, is that her name?
Music tech.
I know she's the art teacher that does technology.
Music technology.
What's that?
Music tech.
I'm sorry, music technology. She has enough stations for 16 students right now. This will give her enough space for 22, which will enable us not to have to potentially not run as many sections next year. So in total, those are the transfers, and happy to answer any questions.
Dan?
Can I just better understand how we end up with some of the excesses in the from accounts?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So with regards to salaries, there's a couple of things going on in our salary account this year. First, we had 3 contracts that had yet to be negotiated when we prepared the budget last year. And we also have unaffiliated that's not determined until after the budget. And going through the negotiation process, we've closed out on secretaries, administrative assistants, and now the TAs. And because the TAs, there's so much turnover in TAs currently, that there's enough money within the account to pay for any incremental increases in wages that we don't have to pull out about $120,000. So that's one piece of it. The largest piece is the number of staff that are on LOA. You probably recall from this current year's budget process going into 23, we had to restore over $500,000 for LOAs because teachers are out this current year. So that's a big chunk of it. And then thirdly is our turnover. We had a lot of turnover at the end of last year. So those are the biggest pieces of the puzzle. We have a few, late hires and a few things that happen just through the natural process of business, but those are the 3 high ones. If you look at contracted services, And I don't know if your ears were burning on Friday, but I was tooting your horn. The two biggest accounts are really the specialists that are used for special ed. A lot of that work has been brought in-house along with OTPT and speech and language. So the combination of those two really account for the majority of the savings in that area. And it's something that happens interestingly enough as you build programs in-house. Not that we expect to reduce, we don't do it to reduce costs, but it's just a natural thing that happens through the process, as we keep in mind the Reading Academy. And then if you go to purchase services, so the big piece in purchase services is really the transportation, which was almost $400,000, and then tuition out of district. We were able to bring, Bill and his team were able to bring back a really high outplacement number, and then a few others. And the alternative program has really helped us out as well. So those are the biggest variances.
Other questions? Thank you for the update. Okay, so I'll ask for a motion to accept the transfers listed in the January 31st, 2022 Statement of Accounts as presented by Dr. Keating. Dan, second. Brendan, all those in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Comments from the public? Anyone wishing to address the board? Okay, thank you. And announcements and future business. Dr. Lutzy.
Sure.
Any updates?
No, simply as I said, the meet and greets are coming up, and very positive feedback from the high school, the 8th grade orientation for the high school. And on Wednesday night, if you're not going to South for the meet and greet, you can head out over to West Haven for the girls hockey playing for the state championship at 7:00 p.m. And so at our next meeting, which is 2 weeks from now, March 21st, we'll have another update on the budget, do look at that calendar again, have another statement of accounts, because we did this one, typically we do it, as you know, in the second meeting of the month, but we wanted to do this now because it's the January, so we'll be doing the February and March, and we'll get back into that cadence. And there we go.
Okay. And so tomorrow night, we mentioned earlier, is the vote on the Board of Finance, vote on our budget, and then...
I believe a public hearing as well.
And a public hearing, yes. It's a public hearing followed by the meeting and the vote. And then we move on to Town Council.
Town Council the week
Next,
after.
yep, next, is it Tuesday, the 15th?
Great.
So, okay, thank you. So I'll ask for a motion now at this point to move to executive session in accordance with General Statute 1-200B for discussion regarding personnel matters. Dan, second. Phil, all in favor? All right. Thanks, everyone.
Great.